Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty. First off, I want to say pardon my voice. I have come down with my first cold since the start of COVID, amazingly. And so I'm a little hoarse and I am sucking on a lozenge, so excuse that. I am here with a full video for you instead of the recent shorts project that I've been working on as part of the hop for the Iron Crafter Challenge. And that is where we take a supply from our stash that maybe doesn't get the love it deserves and put it to use. And this time around, we are working with Flair. So here is my supply of Flair. I just have these few bins and also kind of my pseudo Flair, like buttons styles that can mimic Flair, or these kind of epoxy styles, as well as some puffy stickers and some chipboard styles. Now, the challenge is to work with the traditional metal Flair, which I will mostly use, but I'm going to throw in a few bits and pieces of the others. Now I have this story to tell, which includes lots and lots of photos. So I have these 4x6 sheets that each have 4 photos on them. So that makes them 2x3 photos. So I have 12 2x3 photos altogether. I did go ahead and pre-select some Flair, including some of those other bits and pieces that I mentioned. And I do have my main bin of Flair, which I might pick through a little bit later. And I have pre-cut a few mats for my photos. I did cut apart all my photos, and I will mat all of these photos on these strip mats because I like to group the photos together that kind of match up with the overall story. And so I have started my top row of photos there. I do like to outline my photos, and if I'm matting on another color, I usually use white, or I usually use black ink. But because I am matting on black this time, I will use my white Signo Uniball pen, and you can see the difference that makes. All right, moving on to the next part of this layout, because this is a story about the play Charlie Brown, I did want to do this yellow background with some chevron black stamping on it. I did try on the textured side because I do like the texture of the pattern paper better, but if you've ever stamped on pattern paper, you may know that the texture side is just really tricky to get a good clean stamp on. So once I flipped it over, I did get what I was looking for. And I am moving on to a couple of other steps. I did pull out some vellum to put my title on, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And I have this little party bag that I saved from a big party, and it is a beautiful sparkle, and it doesn't shed glitter. So it is a perfect craft supplies for upcycling, something that I would otherwise have thrown away. And I have started pulling out a few Flair bits. With that paper bag, I did punch these little tab pieces. So those are going to be kind of the foundation for holding my Flair. It's not quite a full cluster look here, but it does add a little bit of grounding to those Flair badges. So I am starting to think about the colors of the Flair and matching up a few colors with stuff going on in the photos, or a few themes, or like I have the word notes, which will go above my journaling. So I'm just kind of matching up the Flair that kind of makes sense with each zone. And then I decided I want a little more gold, so I'm going to punch some stars. And because that zigzag area is going to hold my title, I do need to kind of tone it down just a little bit so that my title will be plenty readable. And I do that with a bit of vellum. So I got my title on there. And a second part of my title is to do some gold heat embossing using the same black pigment ink that I did for my stamping. And because it's pigment ink, you can use it to heat emboss as well. And so my title is gold with black, and my subtitle here will be black with gold. Now, I wanted to make a note of, as I keep working, one of the things that I like about Flair badges is, especially with this strip style of photos, is that they kind of add a little bit of a punctuation to each row of photos, or a separator. Like in the middle row, I have 2 groupings of photos. And so the Flair kind of adds a way to pause what you're reading, or transition between sections. And so it kind of really does act a little bit as punctuation. And then I do have a couple pieces with arrows that help lead the eye. So all of those bits and pieces about the Flair is part of the reasons why I chose each piece for each section, and part of why I'm placing them where I do place them. Now, let's see, where was I? I've got my title down. I did my heat embossing with my subtitle. I'm adding in my grounding tabs to put behind most of the Flair. I did offset my title a little bit so that I would have more nooks and crannies for Flair. And I did want to get 3 next to the word musical, but they don't fit. So instead, I'm going to do a nice grouping next to the yes, please part of my title. And that will kind of complete my rule of 3s for my Flair across that central zone. So that central zone is very full of Flair. And then I have those few pieces that kind of act as that punctuation. All right, as we look through the still photos, I'd like to remind you that this is a hop, so do check out everybody's tips and tricks on how they use Flair. And here's one of my tips. I add stuff on top of my Flair, like stickers or like those gold stars, or here is the puffy sticker on top of Flair. And I didn't cover it very much, but I do adhere my Flair with foam squares, and that usually fills in the depth of the Flair on the back and doesn't add too much extra if you have a thin foam square. All right, that is it for this video. I will be back a couple more times this week with full videos, and until then, I hope you are enjoying the shorts project. Until I see you next time, have an artful day.